Good evening. Welcome to the Man Cave. Today I'm flying solo, but I wanted to talk a little bit. I wanted to do a reaction video to the Punisher special that they put, the One Last Kill special presentation that they did on Disney Plus. I gave it a day so that I could, soak it in, think about it. I've seen what some other people had to say, and some of the spoiler stuff was really cool. The biggest complaint that most people have was, oh, it seemed too short and disjointed. And I don't think that was a mistake. I think it was supposed to seem disjointed because that was Frank's psyche that we saw. I think when it talks about everybody's like, oh, one last kill, but he killed like 100 people. And yeah, I think the last kill, what we saw Frank killing in this was his doubt. We saw Frank kill the doubt that he had in his mission. I really like some people online have said stuff like, oh, well, I especially like, I was watching the Screen Crush stuff. I watched the one that they did yesterday, and I watched the conversation they had today. And Colton really seemed upset about certain parts. And one of the things they said yesterday was that he couldn't believe that the Punisher would kill the innocent kid on the third one. And I think that when he's killing the Ganucci's, or whatever they're called, the crime family people, and the mom's complaining about how her family never did anything to Frank, and they were all good people, and Frank, tore them apart. I think what we saw there was her version of the truth. So things were skewed in favor of her sons and the boys there, because we were seeing it from her disjointed, sort of glazed over memory for the way from the way things really happened. We didn't see the point of view from Frank. We didn't see the point of view from an outside perspective. We just saw it from what she saw, or what she remembered, or what she put together from the pieces of the stories that she heard about what Frank did to her husband, to her oldest son, and her other. So I think that was what was going on, and I think something that everybody seems to miss. Frank is having these hallucinations of his friends. He's having the hallucinations of his family. He's having hallucinations of people he knows, so he's not sure what's real and what isn't real, or what is reality. And people have commented about the newscasters and how they weren't sure they liked the newscast being the synopsis of what had happened before, and they give us all this exposition. And I'm wondering, every time we saw the news footage, I'm pretty sure every time we saw the news footage, it was Frank seeing the news. So maybe that was also something that he saw in his head, as if what he was doing was newsworthy. Also, the other thing I wanted to mention, I'm not sure where this takes place. There seemed to be kind of an argument on the screen with the Screen Crush guys today on, oh, well, Daredevil was in this because he's already been arrested, and I thought what they had said in the interview with the showrunners was that this takes place during and before season 2 of Daredevil Born Again. And at the end of Born Again, when Daredevil gets arrested, he's sitting with Karen and he gets arrested. That seemed to be one of the last pieces of the city putting itself back together. I know in the Spider-Man movie, in the promo, we've seen that the woman, the deputy mayor, takes over. She's going to be mayor of New York. And I think that the lawlessness, it likely was happening during Fisk's reign of terror here, because his soldiers were on the street looking for vigilantes, not looking for law and order, not trying to clean up the city. That's what he called his initiative, was to clean up everything from the vigilantes. But I think the lawlessness that we saw in Frank's neighborhood was a side effect not only of the crime family being taken out so that they weren't keeping things calm anymore, but also because Fisk's law enforcement personnel were more concerned with chasing down vigilantes than making the city streets safer. So I think a lot of regular crime might have been overlooked, and I think that's what we were seeing there, was how it was devolving into mob rule, and it took Frank's vigilante form of justice to start to bring law and order back. I think that was what they were trying to say, and there's been a lot of talk that some of the Daredevil stuff got changed before it, so I don't know how much talking was going on between the different things, but for me, that's kind of how I made it sort of meld together. was the lawlessness that was going on under Fisk. I mean, think about that bullseye scene where he walks into the diner and he starts killing all those people, and then he leaves the bullseye thing. And yeah, he was trying to get the cops to come, so that's what he did. You know, he called in the report. The cops showed up, and it was that anti-vigilante task force group. They showed up to take out him, but nobody seemed very concerned with, you know, the any kind of regular crime that was going on. So if that could happen at a diner in Hell's Kitchen, then a block that's a lot less lawful to begin with could devolve. I think that's what they were saying. It devolved down into mob rule because there was no sense of justice. They knew the cops weren't coming, and there was no vigilantes to protect them because Fisk was taking them all out. So for me, that's what I saw there. I thought it was really what I really like, the one last kill. If from Frank's perspective, that one last kill, when he was sitting at the gravesite of his family, and he put that gun to his temple, and he starts thinking about it, he's like, I'm sorry, I'm done. That one last kill might have been, that was his only out. That was his road to peace. It was his road to letting things lie, to being done. You know, so the one last kill was going to be himself. And then throughout the episode, Frank starts to find purpose again, not only in revenge, because they talked about that a little bit too, about how some people are like, oh yeah, he just has to justify whatever he does. He's only a killer, and it has to come back to he kills, and he needs to justify these kills. So he tries to find these really spurless connections to the idea of these somehow had something to do with the death of my family. I disagree with that assessment. I think that Frank is a killer. Frank kills, but Frank kills for a sense of justice. If you saw Punisher season 2, the one from Netflix, I mean, he had left the state. He had gone away. He saw a wrong at that bar where those guys were coming after that girl, and he stepped in because he felt someone had to. He even tells Amy during the show, he's like, if it hadn't been for you being a woman, I might have let it go. And so he's got this sense of almost chivalry. Some people might call it sexism. Yeah, you know, he's got to protect a little girl versus a boy. But I don't know, and it almost always seems to be a girl that activates it. Today it was his. He said he used to hear his son saying, you know, finish it, Daddy, finish it. And then he said he didn't hear that anymore. But what he did hear was his daughter, you know, and he remembers the stuff with his daughter, and it's, why wasn't I there to protect her? And if I couldn't protect her, maybe I can protect this girl instead. Think about the end of this presentation. I guess it wasn't long enough to be a movie. But I also think that if they had made it people are like, oh, it should have been another hour long. I'm all for more Punisher. I think that would have been great. But this story, to add another hour into it, I'm not sure where they would have gone. This story had Frank lost, Frank struggling with his mind, and the last kill trying to take that chaos out of his mind. And the only way he could think to do it was to end his own life. Whereas by the end of the movie, things are starting to get reordered inside of Frank. He's seeing the visions he's seeing are less judgmental. They seem to be happening less often. And by the time he's sitting, he has to make a decision. Is he going after Maud Nucci and ending her and this reign of terror that she brought down on his neighborhood, or is he going to protect the little girl that's in that bistro or the bodega? And he runs in there and he's like, that's Frank recognizing that he's the Punisher, but in a sense he's also an avenging angel protector type person, because he does what other people can't do, what nobody else could do. They were going to, I mean, the woman that lived across from him in the hallway, when you know, that little boy didn't break him into this thing, but when he breaks out of his room and running through that door on fire and smashes into those people, he walks into that house, and what does he see? He sees an unarmed woman about to be violated in front of her son, and who knows what they then would have done to him. So Frank comes down on them hard, and he takes out these people who are trying to hurt this woman and this little boy. Then he walks outside, and when he walks outside, he's killing assassins left and right, and he's got all these things going on. but he's not hitting any of the civilians in the crossfire. And we see that there are civilians being hurt. There are people being killed that Frank isn't able to protect. And at the time, the cacophony of noise, it's just coming at him and coming at him, and he's got to pinpoint. He's got to focus. All this is helping him to bring things into a clearer picture. That he has to do this in order to. It isn't just about survival at this point. He's helping other people as well. And at the end, that's what he chooses to do. He has that choice. He's standing at a crossroad. I can go and finish this, and I can continue my mission of vengeance on this Ginochi family, or I can turn into protector mode and stop what's happening. And then how does the show end? He comes back. You see that the worst offender, the worst villain, this nameless skinhead guy that we have no idea who he is, but he is the worst person in Marvel. And we know that because he murdered a little tiny puppy right in the beginning that he took from a Marine. I mean, can you get any lower than this piece of garbage that does this to this human being and his dog? So we see him about to take out an elderly couple who are, the streets are finally safe again, it seems, so they're going to go for a walk, and it's a cute little old couple. This guy's coming at him with a baseball bat. It seemed like something in A Clockwork Orange. And what happens? Frank stops him. He administers justice, right? Punishment at the same time. Punishment and justice are now the same thing. And when he takes the hat and he gives it back to the Marine expresses, and he doesn't have to say thank you. He's a Marine. It's all in the look. But what he does say, that's not all he took from me. Frank knows something happened. So Frank, in absolutely no way, shape, or anything, now has this man who has done this terrible thing. It doesn't have to connect back to his family, because Frank has clearly reestablished his mission. He is the Punisher. He's accepting that. If you step out of line, the Punisher exacts vengeance. And that's what happens. In this case, vengeance was justice. And he went up and he took out that guy. And he even looked at the dude like, well, let's make it all right. And the dude gives, again, that look. And it's the it's a Marine, that look between two Marines. That silent communication that lets Frank know this is all right. And Frank has a extremely skewed moral compass, but there is a code there. He doesn't go after the innocent. He doesn't go after children. He protects, and he exacts vengeance when necessary. And he does it in a way that no one else can do. And again, there are callbacks throughout every one of his appearances that we've seen, from when he started back in the old Netflix Daredevil show to when he got his 2 seasons of his own show. He was telling people, "Is this what can you do this, Madani?" Agent Madani had to take out Jigsaw, and she's like, no. I mean, that's why they brought him back in that second season. They brought him to New York because they knew that he could do what other people couldn't do, because his moral compass allows him to live and breathe in the gray. He is not an anti-hero. He's not a hero. He's not a villain. But at some point in his existence, he's filled each of those roles. People see him as a villain. He's been on trial. He's been to prison for doing his things that are against the law, that are against the society's normal moral code. But when Frank is awakened in most of the situations where he's brought in, it's to take care of something that's already happening outside of society's moral code. It's just regular people can't deal with that. It's why we don't see people shooting each other all the time. But in the real world, sometimes there is vigilantes that happen. And it always brings about these kinds of questions. That's what's supposed to happen. And the reason why I think this movie, or this presentation, was good for the length of time it took, and people have said this too, we started to become desensitized to the violence, and we can't. That's the difference between us and Frank. We're not desensitized to the violence that he brings into the world in order to, violence begets violence in his case. It always has. It's always been, this is the solution to what I'm facing. It's the only way he knows. I don't believe that it connects, it's just to his family. And they even hinted at that tonight when Karen is telling him, you were a father, you were a husband, but as soon as you came home, you couldn't live in that world. You didn't feel like that was really you, so you had to go back. You had to re-up. You had to go back over and take care of business because things weren't done. And they weren't done to the Frank Castle way of knowing that there's an end, and as somebody who, we've grown up, we've lived through the wars that we've gone through in the last decades, that, Iraq took forever. And did we finish? Was everything ever all done? Now we're back in the Middle East again because things aren't finished. And Frank comes from an active military career where he's given missions and told this is what we're doing here, and then lived through that idea that it wasn't finished. So when he thought the only way that a weapon can finish is for the weapon to be put away because it's not needed anymore, we see that visually in this show when he locks up everything. He's like, okay, I'm all done with this. That mission is over. My family's avenged. I'm done. Then he goes and he sees that there's still that need for someone like him, for almost a force of nature to be able to be that justice that is being called for by the world he lives in, the world that he's a part of, the world he understands better than the regular person on the street. So I think that the one last kill, that's his doubt of his mission, of who he is. That self-doubt inside of him had to go. And I think that that's how this Marine stands up, gets his stuff in order. You see him come out in his uniform. It's been cleaned up, possibly repainted. He's reclaiming this look, and he's even got his high and tight haircut again. He's back to being what he understands. He's redefining himself. He's redefining his mission. He's looking at what a tool for justice, revenge, whatever you want to call it, is. And when he saw, I want to go back to where we saw him first in season 1 of Daredevil Born Again this past year. When he's in that Daredevil show, the cops who say they're emulating him, all they understood was the violence, not the purpose behind it. And Frank called these guys clowns when they offered to let him join them. He's like, you guys are clowns, this isn't going to work. Frank understands that he's outside of the system, and the system can't do what he does. So having an anti-vigilante task force using vigilante methods, having cops who are going to the same extremes he does, that's not what Frank's looking for. Frank understands he's outside of this system, and that's where he thrives. That's where he's needed. And by understanding that was the last kill. He's taken away all doubt. He's now the Punisher. He's embracing that, and he's ready to re-enter the larger Marvel universe, which is what I think we're going to see. And that's why what Frank did today, or in this show yesterday, has now made him ready to be in the new Spider-Man movie, because he's now shown himself in a neighborhood. Now he's going to show himself to New York, and I think that's what we're going to see. And I think that's where he was when Karen and Matt found him in season 1 of Born Again, and he wasn't ready to face that. He was on that crossroads, and breaking out of Fisk's dungeon, I think, is when he broke out of that dungeon is where we see this show starting. I think that's where that fits in the timeline. He's in this apartment. He's going through this whole. He has doubt because he thought he knew what he was talking about when he confronted those monster cops that were the anti-vigilante task force. But he didn't have that clarity. Because of the doubt that he had, because of the guilt that he carries from not being able to protect his family at the point when they needed him most, and not finishing the job with Jigsaw right away, of not going far enough. So now I think he's recognizing that Frank Castle's struggle is over, and now he is the Punisher. That's what I got from the show. Normally I have my son with me, we can bounce these ideas off ourselves, but he had never watched the Netflix shows, and he was at school and he's working on driver's ed stuff, so I was able to watch this show by myself. So that's why I'm doing this. And I realized that some of the take that I had, I was like, okay, I think I've got a unique take, because when I commented on the Screen Crush thing, and I saw, oh my goodness, I've had 56 people say, oh yeah, we agree, or they gave me the thumbs up thing on my comments. So I was like, you know what, I want to say more. So that's what this is, an attempt for me to put out there what I think they were trying to tell us. And we could be wrong. I mean, that's a great thing about Marvel, about comics, about about storytelling. And that's what this is. This is storytelling in a more visual medium than a comic book. We're seeing action. We're seeing... The great thing is, what they mean is open to interpretation. What I got from this, you might have seen something different. What somebody else got from this, I mean, like I'm saying, I was inspired to do this because I disagreed with what somebody else was saying. And I didn't feel like, paying money to jump into a chat somewhere and say, oh, hey, this is what I think, and take on a conversational tone. So I watched a bunch of conversations, and now I'm kind of responding to what I thought, what they were saying, and where I agree and disagree. Where most of us can agree is what we got was really good. We'd like more, and I think that's kind of the point, is they want us to want more. But for that to have been longer, I'm not sure where they would have gone with it, because at a certain point, we don't want to be desensitized to the violence, so I think they couldn't have given us any more. Can you imagine another 20 minutes of just more killing? What would have been the point? So I think what we got was a really good taste of where he's going. And the arc in this was really subtle, because we see somebody who's fractured, who's doubting, who's sick in the head, to the point where his only solution is to end everything, and instead he finds a different solution in reestablishing his identity, his mission. It's weird because you're not going to say that Frank Castle's healthy, obviously, but by the end of the show, he seems to be in a healthier mindset for himself. So I think that's the journey we went on, and I appreciated it. So thank you very much, Marvel and Disney Plus. I appreciated what we got. I hope you guys did too. And that's going to be it for me this evening. From the Man Cave, I hope you guys all have a good evening, and I'll see you on the next one. Until I do, may all your rolls be crits. Have a good night.